Yeah, exactly.
I have a question about how you said that sometimes people get worried that the partner is going to grow. I have this obsession where I worry my partner's not going to grow. And so I'm like always wanting us to read the books and always wanting us to have the conscious talks, because I wonder where that fear comes from. Is it a fear that because the other fear makes total sense. I just don't know where the fear would come from when you're like obsessed with making sure your partner is growing, because in a way that's kind of wanting to change your partner too.
Well, I mean, I think that type of change generally is the like healthy functional change, right? Is like, let's get to know ourselves more in a healthy way. I think sometimes that fear is if you know that you're growing, Jade, then you don't want this relationship to end, right? Like part of what you're saying is that if you don't come along with me, what I'm afraid of is that we will not be.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
Right. And I think, so when we know the self, right, where you're like, I'm in this work, and yep, like we've got it and I'm fine. I'm meeting new parts of myself and all of that. But I want you to come along. And when I feel your resistance or I feel that you're not maybe as interested in this as I am, right? I think a lot of times that concern can be, shoot, like, will you be able to stand? I call it standing shoulder to shoulder with me, because I don't want to leave you and I don't want this relationship to end. And it's sort of the flip of the abandonment. Like, I don't want to abandon you. I don't want to have to leave you. I don't want to have to disappoint you. I don't want to have to feel the sadness and grief of this relationship not being the expansive, connective one that I've dreamed and envisioned for myself.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
I did want to go back to something you touched on a little bit, but just to double down on it, because it's something I'm really, I wouldn't say struggling with, but working through right now for myself, is why does we sometimes put emphasis on the potential we see in a partner rather than on their actuality? So even, I want to just say this too, and we've talked about it on the show before, but recently I kind of noticed that, it hit me like a freight train, that I have been using the words I love you to basically in place of I love the way you validate my ego. I'm trying to separate the fact that I'm in love with this potential of a person, first of all, that I put onto them. So this fantasy. And then I'm also in love with the way that they're just validating me, not necessarily, whatever real love is or unconditional love is. And so maybe you can put some of those pieces together.
Yeah. I mean, one, there is truth in that we all have the capacity, to grow into something. And I think we want to look for and see the possibility. But the reality of it is more times than others, it's when we connect much more with potential and possibility, it allows us to abandon our boundaries and really like some of the hard decisions of who is in front of me right now. And so in a lot of ways, it's our way of it's this micro manipulation of the self, right? Is like, and listen, it doesn't need to be like this deep intentional thing that we are doing. Like we may not even realize that we're doing it, but there's this micro manipulation that's happening of, I'm going to keep feeding myself a different story than the one that's in front of me. I'm going to keep giving myself a different story so that I have to respond to that story instead of the one in front of me, because the one in front of me feels hard.
Yeah.
Right. The one
I don't like this. I don't like this.
Yeah. The one in front of me is confronting. So if I'm just going to tap it over to the side and I'm going to tell this
make
other
up something. Yeah.
I'm going to make up something. And how we get away with it is because generally we're putting them in a better light. Look how good I see you in this way.
Yeah.
Look how great you could be. And so none of us are generally saying like, your potential is real shit. He's saying like, your potential is just live up to this thing that I want. Right. So no one's like, they're not pissed about how you are framing them.
Right.
Right. And so, yes, what it is these micro manipulations and really these distractions of, if I was not distracted and if I was not manipulating what's in front of me right now, what would be there? And what about that is like, I don't want to go there. It's the no-go zone. Like, what about that is intimidating, confronting, emotional? Because if you were to answer that, you're going to get a lot of intimacy within the self of like, oh shoot. And then it's a direction. What do I have to do about this?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the secondary, my ego says that first, okay, we're going to make up this whole story and we're going to project this potential on this person. It's totally not fair to them, obviously. And then secondarily, when it goes, oh shit, you've been projecting this potential onto this person. well, that's because their actuality is shit. You know, it has this other story that's like, well, no, it's still their fault. It's still their fault. And it's just not wanting to take responsibility for what really is just my responsibility of my perspective, you know, changing my perspective of that person, if that's what I choose to do.
Totally. And I think also, like, what does it keep intact for me that I want to keep intact by keeping them in that position? You follow, right? Like, ooh, I keep getting validated. I keep getting put on a pedestal. I keep what I'm feeling
abandoned.
Like, yes, I'm not abandoned. You'll never leave me. Of what we could tinker around with. But right, like if I had to say, like, what would I be losing by facing what's in front of me?
Right.
What's the threat to me?
Yeah. I know a lot of us, we need validation period. Yeah. Like affirmation. So
how do we do that better for ourselves? I think
that's what I want to know.
Yeah. And it's, gosh, you know, what I learned was, for me in all of this work, and obviously with working with so many people, is that the way that we do that is by facing the things that we don't like to validate about ourselves. And that's not fun, right? Like, it's really not fun to look at the things that we reject, that we disown. I think one of you talked about shadow work before. It's like all of the things that are in our shadow, bringing it out into the light. We want validation to try to like swing it so that, oh, good, right? Tell me the good stuff, right? But how do we do it for ourselves? Really, the answer is by looking at all of the things that we dislike and reject and want to disown about ourselves, and bringing them into the light to restore them, right? To affect them differently, because then we don't need to rely on others to validate the things that we already, you know, maybe we like about ourselves already, right? Like, in order to do that for ourselves, it means bringing the things that are in the dark out of the dark into the light, being with them. And what's funky about that in the beginning is that we won't like them for a while. It's really hard work. It's like,
what do we do with them once we look at them?
Well, that's the healing work, right? Is like, why don't I like it? Where did you come from? Where do I not have a boundary with you? Why do you show up? How do I be in charge of you instead of you being in charge of me? Like, all of the parts, like for me, right? My part of needing to be right and like doubling down. I don't like that part, right? And so how do I self-soothe or validate myself if I have too many of those things hiding out in my shadow? Impossible, really impossible to truly believe ourselves when we're like, you're a good person. I really like you. You look in the mirror and you're like, okay, like, let's do some affirmations. And we're like, bullshit. That's not true. Like, we can see through ourselves because we are within ourselves.
Yeah.
So if we're not being truly honest and doing that hard work, it is gut wrenching sometimes, but it's really, in my opinion, it's a big part of the only way, so that we don't need it from others. Of course, validation is wonderful. We want to accept it from others when it's there. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think when we're trying to cling to it, what it's pointing at is what is in my shadow. And maybe more specifically, Jade, like, that work is to be with it, to understand where it came from. A little bit before of what I was saying is like, why have I not been able to set boundaries with you, the part? What do you serve? How have you protected me in the past? What are you protecting me from? Maybe anymore as much, right? Like, the reason why I need to be right, that protects me from something, right? Because for me, being wrong was dangerous, having a gaslighting father. Like, for me, being wrong was death. You know, it was like, oh, you lose, and that's not safe. And if you lose against him, it can be really devastating. And I should give it up to my dad, because he has made a big turnaround in his life and is so honest and so transparent. And he always laughs. He's like, you always make me sound so terrible. I'm like, no, Dad.
Sorry. All of our parents.
We're like, no, I'll give you the shout out, Joe. Yeah. Joe is good now. He's honest and wonderful.
Big thanks to all our mom and dad.
Thanks, right? But, you know, when I think about like this part of me that I've like disliked and wanted to reject, and like, no, it's not there. There's a reason she shows up. And so when we start to bring both ownership and compassion to all of these parts, I hear, and I also need to be in charge of you. I also need to own you. You can't just run rampant. That's how you hurt other people, right? That's how I hurt other people that I love, right? Then I can start to bring healing to that. So this would probably be an entire podcast on its own, right? Like, of like how to do that work. But I think, you know, that answer, I hope at least we're taking a few things away from it, is like to validate in a very authentic and honest way requires us us to take all of the things that we disown and reject and dislike and hate about ourselves and move it into the light and begin to look at them one by one and find both ownership and compassion for each as we start to move through life with them a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful tool. You could do that probably at home, journaling, free writing, this type of thing. But as you're saying it, I'm having a moment, an epiphany of the fact that I consider myself a workaholic, and I know that that's not the favorite part of myself. And I think that putting these pieces together, it's very much because I'm running from doing the hard, gut-wrenching work of sitting with myself and being still, and, you know, where all that, I know whenever I'm still, all that shit floods up that I need to really look at. And so in noticing that in myself, I wrote down here therapy and underlined it twice, exclamation mark, which I'm a huge believer in, but I don't take enough time to do it. And the reason I bring that up is just because if anyone listening, of course, and telling myself this as well, has a hard time setting aside time to journal and do the free writing and ask yourself all these questions and do the gut-wrenching work, sit in a float tank, whatever it is. Having a therapist appointment that you have to pay to sit on, maybe now because of COVID-19, we'll do it via Skype, but gives you kind of doesn't allow you another choice, you know, because you have an appointment in your day to go sit with someone who's going to ask you to do the hard work, and you've set aside an hour, 2 hours to do that work, and it's work. So if you're a workaholic like me, you should be used to doing the work. Now just make it the work that's actually going to help you in the long term be the best, you know, human and have the best life experience you can. So that's my 2 cents.
And I've heard you talk about free writing as well. So the example you gave about finding out like where it's coming from. So when your mind, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible for everyone listening. So if you're constantly seeking validation of, so say my worthiness, my wound is worthiness. And so that I recognize, okay, that came from, and my mom's the most positive, most loving person, just like you were saying, your dad's flipped it. So has my mom. But as a child, she would try to commit suicide, but blame me for it. Tell me she didn't want to live because of me. So then I grew up with this worthiness wound of, I'm not lovable. People are going to leave because I'm not good enough to stick around for. So when I'm seeking validation from a partner, wanting to fill that worthiness wound, and I know where it's coming from, when someone's in that moment where their brain is needing, like thirsting for that validation, what is the go-to, like maybe thought that you can tell yourself, you know where this is coming from? Do you just tell yourself, because I know you said affirmations, you still know that what you're feeling isn't lining up with what you're trying to affirm?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've done some good trauma work already and like, you know, have some of the foundational pieces, you may, you know, that moment may just be like, just pause, you know, like just pause for a moment.
Instead of reacting.
And sometimes we can't, right? Like, so if that doesn't work for you, no worries, right? But like, I think just seeing like, if I've done some work and I recognize this and I know that there's that part of me that wants to make sure that I'm worthy in this moment because I'm questioning it, but I know why I'm questioning where it's coming from. And I know my origin story. Like, can I just pause in this moment? I choose to pause for 10 seconds the first time. And then maybe another time I try and pause for a minute. And maybe the next time I realize that my pause can only last 1 second. Right? It doesn't matter, right? But that you're just creating a little bit of space between that stimulus and whatever your response is going to be. And one of the things that I have encouraged people to do is leave voice memos. Voice memo is something when you are in a really grounded and clear and loving space with yourself to write like a little bit of a script, right? And so when you feel true and honest and authentic and you're having a really good day, I would encourage you to write a script and then record and hear your loving voice, right? That says like, hey, Jade, it's Jade. And I know that's a little weird, but I'm here because today I'm having a really great day. And I want you to know that in the moment when you're feeling unworthy, you're not. And I know that's true because today, you know, X, Y, and Z. And so in this moment, when you're pausing, just know I've got you, and just know that we'll circle back around, and whatever you need to do, and that's okay. But I just want you to know that the story that you're telling yourself right now in this moment is not the story that I believe about you, and like sending you love, and then silence. You know, and I think because I think a lot of times when we're in it, we really like, And we're like, well, just think about step 1, 2, and 3. And then we're in it and we're like, oh, sorry.
No,
Just like,
it's fine.
1,
Logic
2,
goes
and
out the
3.
window.
Yeah. And we're like, I'm not doing that. But if you can hear your voice and it's like so sweet and it's just like, hey girl, you know, and like, how are you today?
Yeah.
And like, you know, I know that this day would come because we've been here before, and you hear yourself. There's something about hearing your own voice in those moments that's just like, ooh, okay, I think I might be able to believe you because you're me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't lie to me like that, you know? So I think if there was like a tip, I would really encourage everybody to leave themselves a voice memo on a day that feels really grounding, really loving, really that you're going to want to hear and need to hear in that time.
And at least we have cell phones now, and it's not like that Friends episode where Ross left himself a voicemail and Rachel found it.
Totally. I mean, right? It's like the technology right now of just really like the gratitude of the things that we have access to.
Yeah.
So if you have access to that, do that.
Yeah.
It really does. So kind of off of that, when it comes to how we work emotions through our bodies, like after a bad breakup, for instance, why do some of us tend to cling to the suffering, and some of us on the other side of the spectrum, we like deny the suffering completely and pretend like it's not happening?
A lot of it's to do with our conditioning and programming of around what we observed and watched. And so potentially like how a parental system navigated it or how we navigated them, right? So you think like, where do I move to safety? Each of us is different. Like, do I go towards for safety or do I go away for safety, right? And so I think why some of us do it one way or another way is just where was the safety when we did it? What did we see? Because for some of us, the safety was in getting the heck away. And for others, it was clinging and going towards, depending on your scenario and situation and what your system looked like or where you lived or, you know, what was going on in the world around you at that time.
So clinging is more of a victim mentality where we're going to stay in the suffering. We're going to be punished, or what is...
Yeah, I'm trying to think like if there's anything about leaving that.
Like clinging to the story is beneficial because that's part of now who you've identified yourself with as someone who has to be in suffering.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, spot on.
And on the other end, the other person is denying it because they obviously don't want to feel those negative feelings and feel any suffering, or they feel they have to be macho or whatever it is. You've said something about asking yourself, is this serving me, whenever you're feeling one way or the other way, whether you're feeling in that suffering as a loop or feeling in that denial as a loop.
That's right. And I think, again, obviously you're hearing me talk a lot about honesty and transparency with the self. A lot of times when we're doing something that's unhealthy or, you know, seemingly dysfunctional, and I ask the question of like, what is this serving? Most people are like, I know it's not serving anything. And it's like, no, it is serving something. That's why you are doing it, right? And what is it serving? It's serving the fact that I don't have to have the hard conversation. And so then I don't feel confronted by that. Or it's serving that I don't need to feel my emotions because I don't know how to do that or I don't want to do that, right? And so when we get very clear on what is this act serving, right? What is it protecting me from? A lot of times it might be something that's really confronting, but ultimately really healthy and an opportunity for transformation for us.
Yeah. And I think we can use our emotions intentionally, you know, we have the ability to go, okay, you know what, this is a bad breakup or this is something hard I'm going through and I need to grieve it and I need to go through these emotions. And I have, you know, some tools of how to sit with that. And maybe I'm going to take a certain amount of time, you know, an hour to cry about this or whatever it is and scream and yell and journal. But after that hour, I'm going to allow myself to come out of this and go hang out with friends or, you know, go outside and take a jog in the sunshine or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think it's great about getting intentional with a period of time of like, I'm going to feel for, you know, 20, 40 minutes, whatever it is, whatever feels appropriate to you. But then when that buzzer goes off, I'm going to move my energy. You know, it's really important to not just stay in it all the time forever. Like we do need to move our energy. And so getting really deliberate in allowing ourselves to feel intentional with that time, sitting down to do it every single day. And, you know, that can be very hard for people who are not used to feeling and going inwards in that way. But, you know, even if you just do it for a minute, you know, like if that's your start
Literally,
point, beautiful. Do it for a minute, put it down, and then leave and go outside, or, do whatever you need to do, make yourself some breakfast, but start somewhere.
Yeah. And I notice in myself too, this confirmation bias comes up where I will literally stay in a narrative that is unhealthy because it's like tied to making myself correct, even though it's something I don't want to be correct about. Like, I'm not worthy, or, this person left me because whatever the reason I have in my head, and that I've been using as part of my pattern forever and ever to essentially keep myself down. I use them leaving as a confirmation of, well, yeah, that's because I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough, or whatever the thing is. That's sick.
I stay in a
admitting
narrative
it.
because I tell myself, well, I still want to know the answer, because I can't stand uncertainty. I can't stand not having I don't like ambiguity. I like to, feel like I have some sort of
Black and white answer.
Black and white in the box answer. Yeah. But.
Yeah, I think I might have lost you a little bit in there, but I think I traced everything that you guys said for the most part. And I think, part of the thing around confirmation bias is that if, like, what has to happen if this story isn't true? We all sort of understand what the confirmation bias is and got it, right? And we're looking for those things, fine. But what changes? What do I have to change if this story isn't true?
I have to take on a whole new damn responsibility of showing up for myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
and I have to be comfortable in the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and what does it mean for me to actually just be worthy? Right. What does it mean? You're like, what happens in those spaces? Right. Like, sometimes it's like, it can be it is easier to just go with the bias. It's so much easier to go with the bias than to shift and pivot and try on a new story. And there's so many parts of that are confronting. Gosh, was somebody else lying to me? Have I been lying to myself this entire time? Like, what about my operating system has to update if that story isn't true? And Mercedes, like you said, shoot, like a whole heck of a lot has to change if that is not true.
Right.
And that's hard. And do I want to do that work?
Yeah. Always resistance. It's like all I am is a bundle of resistance. I'm like, come on, massage. I'm giving myself a massage just to listen. Oh, wow. Okay.
So good.
Do you have any tips just on the end of that allow us to move through that process with a little more grace and ease to get to a more balanced place, a little easy? Any tips that you feel like have worked well for you?
I mean, I think one is, like, if we start off with understanding, like, what are the biases that I hold and carry, like, first naming them. And then I'd say, like, what does each one serve and what does each one block? Okay. And just starting to get familiar with, like, why do I keep this? What do I gain from this? And then what am I missing out by believing in this? And so for me, a lot of this right now is like the familiarity with these things, getting to know them, having a sense of around this. Our biases in a lot of ways protect us from things that we might not feel like we're ready for or know how to do. And so it might not be about jumping to, here's how you totally eradicate all of the biases that you've had about yourself. Like, that might not be the answer. And so I think maybe the first step is just know what they are first, and then know what they serve and what they block for you in your life, and see how that feels as a start.
Yeah. So we have some Magic Map questions. The first one is, I would love to know her daily rituals or with routine.
Oh, I like this. So I'm displaced right now and not in my home with all that's going on. But my normal routine is that my husband and I wake up, we Palo Santo the apartment. I'm all about scent and sound. Piano music goes on in the morning. I make us our coffees, and Connor does some breath work. We get into meditation, and then we sit in our 2 comfy chairs and we have coffee together. And we do that for generally about 30 minutes every morning. And that's our time to just just connect about whatever's going on, whether usually it's not work related stuff. Usually it's just like how we're doing, how we're feeling, what's been coming up for us. And so we really do carve out that time in the morning to connect and spend time together without devices. It's uninterrupted. And, was the question just the morning routine?
Yeah, or like a ritual. Yeah. But
yeah. And I have the same sort of like type of ritual for evening too, is like winding down, tea, scent, get the diffuser going, and just sort of this coming down together as well. But I generally try to get some type of movement in during my day, but that doesn't happen in the mornings usually. That's usually somewhere else throughout
Yeah,
throughout the day. So
Hmm.
but I love our mornings, our little mindful mornings together.
Yeah. And just for
I
our
love
listeners,
that.
your husband is Connor Beaton, right? He
Yes.
does coaching with men.
Yeah. He does a lot of shadow work with men.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'd love to have him on.
Oh, he'd love to.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
I'm speaking of boundaries, Vienna.
How's Tuesday?
Listen, we're on self-quarantine, so we can do podcast galore.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
All right. So another Magic Mob question is, when's a good time for a new couple to start going to couples therapy?
What I can say is that most couples, like our research, the research shows that couples come to couple therapy about 4 years too late. So if we take
Wow.
that research first and then sort of flip it, it's that, this, I think a lot of times the story is that something terrible has to be going on in your relationship for you to come to couple therapy, right? So we've talked a lot today about the narratives of, what it looks like to fall in love, what it means to go to couple therapy. The reality of it is so many of the people who come to therapy with me are in a place where they're just wanting to deepen and strengthen their relationship, their understanding of themselves and their partners. And sometimes they're doing preventative work, which might mean that they're just getting ahead of the game.
Yeah.
And, that's a beautiful thing to do if you are fortunate enough to do it. I know that it can be a luxury for many, but I don't think it's too soon really ever obviously have an established relationship.
Yeah.
It's not the first few weeks of dating, but I think it's that when you are in a place where both of you want to deepen and strengthen, you will have a third party in the mix who is going to just see your dynamic differently than you see your dynamic. That's just the reality of it. And you might think that you know so much about yourself and so much about your partner, but the way in which you come together and the way that your fabrics mix and mingle with one another person who's really skilled and trained in that space is going to be able to highlight a lot of things just as an observer. And so I don't really think that there's a too soon type of thing. Obviously, have your relationship be established and enjoy yourselves, see some of the patterns that come up, but I would not say that there's a too early thing, especially if you're going into it just wanting to learn more about yourself. How beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you recommend anything that couples can do in their own homes on their own time type of thing as well that have been helpful in your with your clients?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of free resources out there. I have a free relationship journal that couples can do together. There's also one for people who are not partnered right now. So I can send that to you guys. And it's it's a really straightforward, simple journaling process of going through some of this work. Connor and I, my husband and I, also have a course called Get the Love You Want. And we can send you guys also a discount for all your listeners. And it's a 6-week course. It's really honestly a great course. I was unsure about how a course, especially I see 35, 40 clients a week. I love being in person with people, but I love this course and I'm really proud of it. And it's a deep dive into self and relational awareness, understanding our family systems. And then we dive into communication, conflict, boundaries, and then sex and intimacy.
Is it similar to
Pace? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Is it similar to Gottman's 8 Dates, or is it more similar to Harville Hendrix? Because it's a similar title.
Yeah. It's not, I mean, we pull a little bit from different places, but most of it is from what we've seen in our work of the things that really go into navigating healthy relationships. And so, we certainly use some stuff from that gets regurgitated. And obviously, some of the boundary work we pull from Dr. Alexandra Solomon, who's a wonderful friend and colleague of mine, some of the language around rigid, porous, and healthy boundaries. But yeah, it's very much a reflection and extension of, the work that we do with couples. And I think when you're doing relational work, I believe it's really important to work with people who work with couples, because I think that you can have ideas about relationships that are totally spot on. But, when you have couples in front of you where you see the true disconnect and the challenges and what the struggles and why certain things are not just easy as following 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is what this course is created and built on. And so, that's something that can be done. I'm trying to think like the 8 dates, there's things like buying a book, or I think the Gottmans also have these like cards that like the questions, the love mapping questions. I'm trying to I'll have to think about, I'll send you guys more stuff if there's anything that comes
I'd love to take your course.
It's so good.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you if you're taking on couples as clients still as well, because my husband and I also, boundaries speaking for him, but would love to do that.
Oh, you're so sweet. So I'm full with a bit of a wait list at the moment, but I have a practice in New York City. Right now we've moved everything to digital at the moment, just for the time being. But, please reach out. You can find me at New York Couples MFT. And, I'm trying to bring on more support in the practice. We have a number of therapists there, but we're still in the process of expanding. So thank you.
But you can take your course without being your...
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. I was going to also ask you, this is part of the Magic Mob question. Is it important to go to a different therapist for couples counseling than you do for personal talk therapy?
Usually, yes. I think many of us like to split it up just because of the biases that can happen there. There are certainly times where it can make sense, right? And so a lot of times it is case by case, and we're having to navigate. We all have different stories and safety, security. Like sometimes the right decision is to work with the different parts of the couple. But generally speaking, it's really great to have a different space for the individual and the couples. So generally, yes, sometimes no.
I could see that. I could be like, if I'm going to your therapist, he's going to be on your side and everything. All right, Vienna, there is a few short questions we like to ask everyone who comes on the show. So first off, if you could hug your younger self right now, what would you say?
She'd probably be about 5 or 6 years old. And I would say, you can take up space.
Why did you feel like you couldn't?
Because the system around me was shaking so much, and they felt like they were crashing and burning so much. And so my response was just handle everything that you need on your own and take care of it yourself.
Yeah. Were you an only child, did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's hard.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
Oh my gosh. Wow. Do people have an answer for that?
Sometimes it's right away. It's what you're doing.
Oh my goodness.
Mine is usually getting the love you want. That's usually my answer.
I love getting the love you want.
Yeah.
I do. I love getting the love you want. Maybe daring greatly. I think Brené's work is so easy to receive, but gosh, oh man, there's so many. But okay, that's my answer.
We had a guest, Michael Brody Waite. That was his answer.
Yeah.
So that's the only one who said that so far.
But Brené, she's such an inspiration.
She is.
Great stuff. Okay, I'm going to add in a question on our staples. We'll see if it sticks. You'll be the first time we're asking this question.
All right.
So it's a little dark maybe, but I think it could actually hold a lot of lightness. So if you could have anything written on your tombstone, what would you have it say?
Or the theme of your eulogy, it can be.
Yeah, if you don't want to be buried in the ground.
I want to be buried in the ground, but in a tree pod.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if the tree pod could have
I
think
Black.
maybe she lived awake, something like that.
I love that. She lived awake.
All right.
I like that.
I like it too. I think I feel like we need to add that one. I like that question. If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
You have the capacity to heal.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
You mentioned it, I think, already, but where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So on Instagram, my website is newyorkcouplescounseling.com. And on that site is where all of my events and panels and retreats and all the things. Obviously right now, most of that is canceled.
Yeah.
But, if we're hanging in this together and you want to check in a few months, that's where all of that will be. So those are the main two places where you can find everything.
Awesome.
Okay. I hate to ask you this, but will you tell us one more time, just because you broke up in the beginning of it, and I want to make sure we get that especially clearly. And this won't, Jay, do you know where this will air?
This will air in the summer, so hopefully all your events will be going on.
Well, let's pretend it's all going on.
Cool. Awesome.
So just tell us where people can find you online.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at mindfulmft. And then my website is newyorkcouplescounseling.com. And you can find all of my events and panels and workshops and retreats there. So both of those platforms have all the information that you would need.
Yay.
Awesome.
I'm
Thank you
excited.
so
I'm definitely
much.
going to look into signing up for your couples and
Me too.
workshop because
Awesome.
Yeah.
yes.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for really, you're asking us to trust that doing the work will lead to something so much better. And I think that a lot of people might not trust that. So thank you for speaking that out into the universe. I think that it will lead us to doing it and finding out that it is worthwhile. So thank you for giving us the tools to get there and for being such a light.
Yeah,
Thank you
and
for
this
having
is
me.
one of the best conversations I've ever been a part of. I know it's so hard to find a therapist that you really, really connect with, but you're what I think, you're like a dream therapist. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That means so much. Thanks.
Yeah, you're definitely in your calling. So thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me.
I really meant that. It was like one of the best conversations I've ever been in.
Yeah, me too.
Speaking of conversations, like my magic trick is about conversating.
Okay, go on.
But it's from her Instagram actually, and it's funny because I don't think of myself as a gossiper, but the day I saw this post, I was in a gossiping conversation, and had I not been, I probably would have just breezed right past this. But she had a Instagram post that said, if you find yourself gossiping, ask yourself, what am I gaining from this? Am I feeling badly about something within myself? How does this gossip make my pain any less? What's it helping me avoid? So she says in the caption, stay with it, stay with those answers. We can all find ourselves in this space, hanging out with that shadow energy, the parts of ourselves that we feel insecure about, want to hide, the parts we want to ignore and disown. Gossip serves something. Maybe it helps us avoid something we are insecure about. Maybe it helps us feel above another. Maybe it puts our lives into perspective by putting someone else's life down. So pay attention to it. Notice yourself or others in that space and how you respond. Notice what you feel after you gossip or partake in someone else gossiping. Where do you feel it in your body? And process that. Be with it and see what comes up. See what you can face instead of avoid. Right now, it's just about bringing our attention to it. So I noticed for me, it's never like, oh, did you hear about, or like, oh, guess what happened? It's never that type of gossip. It's always like, it's almost disguised as a growth, enlightening conversation, like it's always like somehow works its way in as that. So I'm working at still applying that even because when it's in that context, you don't always feel like when I'm in a car with girls on the way to work and we're actually gossiping and talking down about someone, that doesn't feel good. That feels low energy. That feels low vibration. The gossip I catch myself in, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's disguised as high energy, even though it's not. So my work right now is to pay closer attention.
I like that.
Yeah.
Can you check your mic? There's something going on. It's like very fuzzy. Check the Zoom and see what it says it has you as.
That's right. I think it's my computer fan or yours or something. But
mine's not on, but I hear something now in the background. But there's also like when you're maybe it's because it's capturing part of it, the sound of the fuzz. I didn't notice it the whole episode until now. I don't know. It's like it's definitely not how you started the episode though.
Well, at least we're at the end.
Yeah, but you can turn your fan off if you want. You just hit command.
I don't hear my fan.
Well, I hear something in the background now. It's going.
Okay. Well, we've got like 4 minutes left. Just your magic trick. So we'll figure it out before we do the next episode.
Okay. Yeah, it's really good. To ask yourself why you're gossiping, because we just fall into that sometimes. We fall into talking about someone else or something that's out external, it's an external thing that doesn't really have anything to do with us, and we decide to put our judgments on it or whatever. And I think asking those questions is really powerful because yes, I notice if I'm doing that, it's probably because I'm avoiding looking at something in myself. And if I'm holding judgment on someone else or gossiping about someone else, it's usually because it's always because there's something in myself that is triggering that is true about me, and I don't want to look at it. And I think that's an important concept, is that if you can recognize something yucky in someone else, it's because it also lives in you. So thank you for that. My magic is some things to ask yourself when you're upset. So it kind of goes in line with what you were talking about there, Jade, but
all shadow work.
Yeah, this whole episode is all the work, but it's so important and it is so worthwhile because it will, like we were talking about with Vienna, allow you to live a more full and vibrant life, in my opinion. Or at least the work I've done so far is just like exponentially made my life better. So the things to ask yourself when you're upset, or if you feel any of that angry feeling, you feel that heat in your belly, you know, that concaving of your chest where you just feel like you've got this anger or this part of you that is not the way that is comfortable or how you want it to be. So ask yourself, what does this remind you of when you feel those feelings? What is the origin story? So for example, what was the first time I experienced something like this, even if the content was different? And ask yourself, if my feeling could speak, what would it say? Where do I feel it in my body? And answer this: the threat or fear that I'm experiencing is, and what I need right now to support myself is. So it might seem funny to ask your feelings and experiences questions like this, but this is a route we can take to getting more intimate with ourselves. And when we're able to do this, we move ourselves towards self-soothing and self-healing, like we were talking about with Vienna, you know, figuring out how to validate this stuff for ourselves instead of asking that of our partners and our loved ones, which is an unfair request. It truly is. So I'd invite you to take on the responsibility of creating space for yourself to do this work, because in doing it, we're raising the vibration on this planet together, y'all. And I know you are all show up people. That's why you're listening to this podcast right now. So I'm going to thank you in advance for taking that time and energy to do this work.
Yes. Thank you guys so much. And not just for that, but for just always tuning in, even when the topic might seem heavy or hard, and just being on this journey with us. If this episode held some magic for you, please share it with your friends and family. This would mean so much to us. And also, don't forget to join us on our Instagram page at The Majic Hour and let us know what your favorite episodes have been so far. We appreciate all of your feedback and want to know what's lighting you up.
So go back and listen to that and enjoy. Let us know how you like it. Until then, you guys, be a light.